Hello, everyone. Hi, everybody. How are you, Java guys, Java fans? And also today we welcome on behalf of you our guest, Otavio. Hi, Otavio. How are you?
Hello, everyone. Super glad to be here. So, good evening, good night, good morning, wherever you are right now. And let's discuss a little bit more about Java and domain-driven design, right?
Yes. Very, very super interesting. And also the community is amazingly really waiting for this session. So, guys, on behalf of you, I would like to really thank Otavio for accepting our invitation here. By the way, thank you so much, Otavio. You did also a session with us last year in Riyadh Java User Group. I hope you still remember it. It's been almost 1 year now.
Oh, yes. So, let's
Yeah,
keep
thank
this tradition every year.
you.
I came here to
Yeah,
discuss a little bit.
yeah, sure. So today, guys, we'll discuss about the triple Ds. It's a very amazing topic to discuss. We really require it in our day-to-day development. Before we start, let's give a little bit introduction about Otavio. He's, of course, a well-known Java champion. He's a worldwide speaker. He is a book author also. He compiled like many books, and recently the beautiful book, Domain-Driven Design in Java. I'm wondering, Otavio, why didn't you choose a topic in 2025 about AI or something like this, just out of curiosity? Yes.
Yeah, I mean, uh, basically, we're discussing about AI. We have new tools to increase our productivity. However, our issue is not about productivity, no anymore. We are writing even more code with more code, but going to the wrong direction. So it doesn't matter how fast you can type your code, doesn't matter how fast AI can generate your code. If at the end you're not getting what the client wants, right? So you're not making impact with that. That's why I
Absolutely.
decided to do a step back. So why people still believe in AI instead of uh, go to what we need to do.
Yeah, I agree, 100% agree. Yes, so that's with this being said, guys, before we start the session, please drop down your questions below in the comments. And also, the session is recorded. You can also go back to our previous sessions with Otavio and other also speakers at Riyadh Java, at Riyadh Jug. So without further ado, the mic is yours, Otavio. We hope like have a wonderful session with you. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you again for inviting me here. So, hello everyone. Again, super happy to discuss one topic that is not a buzzword, especially because let's say it's a boring technology methodology because it gets results, right? So let's discuss about domain-driven design. What is that, and how we can do that, and why it should matter to discuss topic like this on 2025. The first question that I have and that I'd like to discuss here is why domain-driven design? Why it still matters? Why it's still important? And why we should care about this? First, and naturally, technology is a strategic resource that we have nowadays. So everything is around software. And we could see a huge amount of magazines talking and discussing more about this. So CMMI goes around that with every business is a software business. Every company is a data company by CEO Network. And Forbes, since 2011, are discussing one thing that's for some companies is not that clear enough. That is, every company is a software company. So come on, it is impossible to get away of software, and everything is around it. Business is around software. Companies is around software. So we become a kind of important in any kind of area of the humankind. However, we have something to be said. So we are super important in the humankind. We are increasing the number of tools, productivity right now with AI. However, we got this report from Forbes that, if I'm not mistaken, every year they do any kind of report like that, and it usually does not change. So this one here is the 16 obstacles to a successful software product and how to avoid them. And again, we have kind of every year or every 2 years, and those topics might change the descriptions, but in general, we can see in summary those topics since 2011. So we have a huge, sorry, we have a huge amount of planning and design sessions to deliver what's not clear to the client. So imagine a scenario that you go to a restaurant or a pizzeria, you order a pepperoni pizza, waiting for 4 or 5 hours to receive a Caesar salad, and you need to pay €1,000 or $1,000 for that. How about this? So we have a huge amount of meetings to delay a product that the client doesn't care. And okay, Otavio, if you're not doing, we are working, right? We are kind of busy. But if you're not delivering what the client needs to do, what else we are doing? Naturally, we are delivering unexpected complexity. And as a consequence, we are having a poor collaboration between us and the product team. So we have this huge obstacle between us and the product team. And why? Again, we are super busy, right? To have a couple meetings, methodologies, and so on. So why we are not delivering what we need to deliver? Because we are delivering complexity instead. So we have way more companies delivering products, ID, database, and so on. So the developer experience market, so the companies where the goal is to deliver something that make your life easier, become huge with a huge amount of tools, frameworks, and solution. And then we start to facing the choice paradox. And what does that mean? So you have a huge amount of choice that sometimes we spend more time choosing the right one instead of do the operation. And that's happened with me every single night, because those nights I want to watch something, but I have a huge amount of streaming right now. So I have Netflix, Amazon Plus, Disney Plus, Amazon Prime, HBO, and so on. So sometimes I took 1 hour to choose a movie or a series to fall asleep after 5 minutes. How about that? So I spend more time choosing the movie than watching them. And that's exactly what happened with the developer experience right now. So we have clean architecture, event-driven design, a huge amount of software architecture decision that sometimes we have a huge amount of nightmare to choose the proper one. But okay, Otavio, we are not delivering software that the client wants because we put a lot of complexity, but we are thinking the future, right? Because usually when you create some abstraction, we're gonna use the term, oh, let's put this because you might use in the future. And the answer for that is, unfortunately, our code, even with those ideas, is not ready to change. Especially because the more expensive part of the software right now is the capability of change, especially because we try to see the feature, but we don't want to spend time one thing that it is crucial, that is writing tests, right? So instead of doing abstraction, If you do tests, the change will be more cheaper than trying to see the future. And even with doing the proper way, the right message, and so on, we're still facing the software erosion, especially because this one comes from the building evolutionary architecture. So the software erosion or the software rot is when we decrease the software quality, is the natural deterioration of software quality over the time. So think about we are not able to update the Java version anymore, your favorite framework anymore, the database version anymore. So this kind of thing will decrease the quality, especially because the business has changed. You did some code refactoring, something like MVP right now becomes um, a production code and so on. So eventually you need to spend time refactoring. But we put a huge amount of complexity that's hard to change. And it is hard to keep the code updating and super clear as well. And based on that, the first question that I do have on my mind is, are we doing a proper software engineering? So are we doing an efficient way to solve this kind of problem? Because we are wasting a huge amount of time in meetings creating complexity, and guess what? Nothing is ready for change. As a consequence, we have the premature legacy and not achieving the client goals. So we are we are wasting a huge amount of time doing what nobody wants to do, or not doing at least what the client does not want you to do. So we are mistaking the core principle of software engineering, right? We are mistaking the core of the software development itself, because if you go, there is a huge amount of definitions. My favorite one comes from this book, The Modern Software Engineering by David Farley, that has this definition. So software engineering is the application of an empirical, scientific approach to find efficient economic solutions to the practical problems in software. So the efficient and economic solution are the keywords right now. So we need to find something that is efficient and that makes sense to the client budget. Otherwise, why they should pay for that? And that's come out the domain-driven design. So if I can summarize domain-driven design in a single quote, we can say that it's a design software to meet business goals with less real work. Because our code, our architecture, our methodology goes around what we need to do instead of focus more on complexity or focus more in whatever it is not necessary. And I know there is a huge amount of definition around domain-driven design, especially if you come from IT area. Please allow me to explain first what is not domain-driven design, and then I give to you the proper definition of domain-driven design, especially because this one is still the biggest misunderstanding in the software industry. So let's explain first what it's not. So domain-driven design is not a technical framework. It's not because you are putting repository and empty annotation. It's not because you are using Java. It's not because you choose microservice architecture pattern. It's not related to the code only. Actually, this one is the biggest mistake when we discuss with software engineering. So domain-driven design is not code only practice. And at the end, it's not increase the complexity of your code. In general, it goes to the opposite. So if you are putting a lot of complexity in your code, that might be that you are not applying correctly the domain-driven design. So explain what is not domain-driven design. Let's explain a little bit what is domain-driven design, right? Especially because you are here to listen and learn to what is on the real world. So again, the domain-driven design has a goal to handling and focus and put more emphasis in the business than anything else. We have at least four pillars of domain-driven design. Naturally, the domain, that is the knowledge to communicate with or between engineering and the product team. So at the end, we are talking and discuss more about the transfer knowledge between two areas, the product and the soft engineering or the engineering area. And domain-driven design has two layers or two modeling. So the tactic, that is usually the second step. This is one mistake, right? Because people usually put a huge emphasis on this one here. And the crucial for me, that is the strategy where we should start with, because it brings us the reason to do any kind of code, right? So domain-driven design, we should drive our code by the domain, that is the business knowledge. So being strategic is crucial to this kind of thing. I mentioned about those two modelings. Naturally, let's start with the crucial one, at least the first step, that is the strategic. So again, as I mentioned before, it's still the biggest mistake that we have. So we have the domains or the knowledge. Naturally, you can put in subdomains or sub areas. With that, we can define the common terminology between areas, to define the mapping or the integration between those areas, and finally, the bounded context. So again, we define the knowledge of the organization, the subcategories of this normalization. We define the common language or the terminology of those areas or ubiquitous language, to define the bounded context of each area, to finally define the mapping or the integration between those areas. So starting with the domains, as I mentioned before, we have subdomains where we have at least two categories. So by the Eric Evans book, we have those three. The core, the most important one, it is what makes your company your company. It is the unit part of your organization. Then we have with the highest business differentiation, and usually it has a high business logic complexity. The generic subdomain, that is usually across several companies like security. It does not bring any business differentiation, but it brings some complexity in stuff that tactical perspective. That's why sometimes you can use third party or open source to make your life easier. Naturally, security is important for everybody, but you can use Jakarta security to make your life easier. Put in a couple of notations. You can use Spring security, you can use Quark security, and so on. And the last one is the supporting. So it helps with the core business activities if it does providing competitive advantage. So the business differentiation is medium and the complexity might vary. So in this here, we can find what is the high priority and where we should work more often. So naturally, it is on the core subdomain. Here we have this graph that shows the business complexity and with the business differentiation. So naturally, this one here, it is more important, or the core. Again, pay attention to that point, especially because when you talk about Jira activities or tasks or whatever task management you are using right now, your emphasis should be in the core or the more important. Hierarchy supporting, you can consider using a third library or any open source framework instead of you doing by your own or doing by your bare hands, right? So instead of having your machines that is not business differentiation, you can use some cloud providers such as Oracle Cloud. With those subdomains defining your companies or sectors, let's define a way to communicate, right? Because domain-driven design is about communication. The core area here, in the critical part, is the communication. So defining that the common terminology is crucial. Defining the ubiquitous language is the first step for any kind of work with domain-driven design. So here I have the sample where I have the same word with three different meanings. So we have Ajax, that is the clean product. We have Ajax, that is the soccer team. And finally, the Ajax, that is the technology that everybody hates, right? So we have a single words, three different meanings. And I need to make sure that when I talk about this topic, everybody has a clear understanding what I'm talking about. Oops. After defining the ubiquitous language, it's time to define the context or the bounded context. So here, as you can see, we have both sales and supporting, sharing the same terminology, but naturally with some differentiations. So naturally, when we talk about sales and customer, we are mostly talking about pre-sales and or the sales itself. Support goes mostly when something goes wrong after the users buy something. So we can share some knowledge, but even with that, we have those subsets. And the strategic, naturally, when you have sectors, areas, or even outside integration, like imagine that you have an e-commerce, naturally, you can have integration with Stripe, PayPal, and so on. And we have patterns to make those integrations, right? So we have the share, we have a customer supplier, conformist, open host service, anti-corruption layer, published language, and the separate ways. I will and cover one by one here. Naturally, don't worry. I will show you a link where you can take in more information. But on those integrations, again, between areas, we have those common overview of those seven patterns. So we have the shared kernel where two areas are working the common library. We have the customer supplier where the upstream is providing functionality to the downstream. So imagine that I have two areas inside my organization, one from payment, another one to order. So both are working together, but naturally, as order, I will put a huge amount of influence inside the payment requirements. Then I have the conformist that, okay, it is impossible to have an influence in my payments. For example, if I'm working with PayPal or Stripe, right? So I need to understand that I cannot change anything. It is happen. So we have the anti-corruption layer that we can find as a protection of your business. So in this case, I have my upstream as a payment. I'm blind. I put a protection here. This way, my order is safe. In this case, if I decide to change my payment to something else, I can do it easily. The published language, where team agree to have a well-defined communication language or schema to all those areas. For example, in the bank, it's super normal to have a definition of money, how they will treat that. A separate ways where everybody goes different directions and it is fine. Okay, sorry. Okay, I need to go back a little bit. So wrong button, sorry guys. So open host service is a gateway where I will expose my service. And actually, there are a couple ways to handle this kind of thing. So to extract this information, to extract this knowledge and move to strategic. One way is using domain storytelling. For me, it is the most efficient way. By the way, we have a question. So let's go back. Okay. The anti-corruption layer works like an interface with dependency inversion. Yes, you can think about this, but we we can think about this or some wrapper. The point is to protect your business for a couple libraries, right? So you can put just a version, dependency version, but you can put even the whole component as dependency version, or you can have a library to protect your business. But yes, you can think about that. Open hosts, the domain storytelling, where, as I said, why I do believe here. So I don't know if you are familiar with Harari. He is an anthropologist who wrote a lot of books about the humankind history. And your latest book about the domain data story, he explaining that the most ancient technology that the humankind has is the capability of doing storytelling. So I love this, especially because we are using the most mature technology that the humankind has. So even before we are capable of write, we were talking history about Artemis, Apollo, Athena, Zeus, and so on. So the most ancient technology is the storytelling. Furthermore, we have tools like these to allow us to put that on the Git, where you're able to versioning any kind of change. Here it's simple, so we can do as a graph. So we have the domain experts that tells domain stories, domain story to developer. The developer draws domain story, and finally the domain experts reads and corrects the domain story. Here you can see that we have at least a context where we talk about, we can define based on that a couple of ubiquitous language, and then go to the implementations, right? So domain experts could be an NT, developer could be an NT, and so on. So don't worry about those terminology yet. We're gonna cover those later. But my point here is with that strategic, you can go to the tactic. Okay, as I mentioned before, first strategic, then go to the tactic at the second step. So we have 7 parting as well. So NT, service, repository, aggregates, value object, factories, and events. So the NT is the one that has a unique attribute to identify. Value objects is usually an immutable object. So, for example, it could be a type, email or money, and so on. Aggregate is a cluster of entities. So imagine that you have an order that had the status and a list of ordered items. And this ordered item contains a product and quantity and so on. So in this case, I'm aggregating products inside my order. Repository is my gateway to my aggregates. So I will handle these abstractions. Could be relational database, NoSQL database, and so on. So my order repository is able to do this abstraction of collection. On this case, I have my order repository, find by ID, delete, find by customer, and so on. I have my factory, that is where I can find how to create my classes. My domain service, sometimes we naturally avoid to have this anemic model or put just scatter and status and the entity. We can have one more class to handle this kind of domains or this kind of rules or implementations. So the domain service is a place that you can put that. Domain event, when something happens that is significant to the system. And finally, this one here does not belong to the domain-driven design, but we usually use with different names, such as in software clean architecture, we have one. So it will coordinates applications. and aggregate hooks and application service and so on. And one good point, why this strategic is more important than tactical. So when you go to the strategic, um, we can maybe start slow, but with the time, it pays the worth. So this comes from the philosophy of soft design book, this graph here. But usually pay attention to don't go focus much on on the tactic if without caring about strategic. So for repository, how to manage transaction without leaking database to service, and also respecting the scope each repository. I heard about unit of work pattern, but I don't get how to manage these on domain-driven design. So it's a good question. How to handle transaction? Naturally, it does not belong to the repository. It handles more to the implementation itself, especially because some NoSQL database, for example, does not have it. Um, but naturally, if you are using Spring, for example, uh, you can have your annotations or meta data information, your domain service, for example, and or if you are using Jakarta data, you can have the stateful of this kind of thing in the next version. Okay, so how to handle that is again belongs to the implementation, and you can use metadata to handle that easy for you. But usually, if you don't define anything, it will be atomic. So every operation, one single transaction. So thank you for the question. And actually, when we talk about domain design, we usually talk about also about soft architecture. So naturally, you can fit domain design or in any kind of architecture. This one here is the sample from the book. So presentation layer, application layer, domain layer, and infrastructure. The presentation layer is the interface or the interaction with the user directly. Application layer is about making this thing available to people use. On this case, the presentation layer. The domain layer is where you have your rules. The infrastructure is something that can help both application or domain layer. So naturally, every time that we talk about design, we usually go to discuss architecture as well. And I love this book they have for soft architecture, especially because they define both as spectrum. So when you talk about architecture, you we eventually touch on design, and we talk about design, we will eventually touch in architecture. So it's impossible to do if without those two. Architecture, it is crucial. It is represents our strategic domain design. Remember the two rules about architecture. So everything soft architecture is a trade-off, and the reason to do that or the why is more important than the how. Okay, as I mentioned before, architecture style, you can fit any kind of architecture style inside domain design, CQRS, orchestration architecture, layered architecture, microkernel, microservice. So even the one by the book or even the design, you can combine whatever you want with domain design. Again, domain design is agnostic, especially because the goal is to move the knowledge of the business to the code. You can use optimization to make your life easier. So those tools are amazing. Arc Unity combined with Gmolecule. You can use JackStyle and PMD to guarantee some code quality, and you are using properly the your code. Okay, there is one more question. Is there the difference between domain-driven design and external model? Yes, there is. So if you go to the buy the book, as I mentioned before, by the book, domain-driven design brings just three layers, right? Presentation layer, application layer, domain layer, and infrastructure layer. The architecture one, or the hexagonal model, brings ports and adapters, so it puts a little bit more layers on your business. So yes, there is a difference, a tiny difference. You can say that the hexagonal model has the domain-driven design because it has more layers, so it has important adapters and so on. Okay, so go to the sample. So you can use J molecules, for example, to put some soft architectural evidence inside your code. So it's on here. So NT identity, and then run some tests in your code. You can use Arc Unity to define this as well. The main difference is with J molecule, you can make your life easier in some circumstances. There is a gap, right, between more discussed and soft architecture in the code, especially because you don't have layer as keyword in Java, for example. But when you go to architecture, you talk that a lot. There is no component in the Java keywords, and we discussed that a lot inside soft architecture perspective. So um, that is a point that I would like to cover today. So when talk about domain-driven design, I know there is a huge universe, especially because there are two modeling, the strategic and the tactic, where the strategic go more to understand what you need to do first, understand the reason, and define the soft architecture, and then go to the implementation. Right? That is the tactic. Both are important. However, if you focus to do something, if you don't understand what you need to do, you go wrong. Again, AI increased our productivity, but we are doing way more code in the wrong direction. Here is our, for me, it is the 6 steps to become a great software engineer. So based on the context, have a good documentation, test, soft architecture, code design, persistence, and finally leadership. Naturally, uh, oops, sorry, too much faster. I am not able to go to whole details about domain-driven design here. That's why I'm super glad to release this book that brings with more topics to discuss around domain-driven design. So you can use the QR code, you can use the link on the web page. And that is it for today. So my name is Otavio Santana, software engineer and architect, Java champion, Oracle Ace director. I have been working Java since Java 8. So if you are not enjoying Java, sorry for that. Apache and Eclipse committer, Jakarta EE, Micro Profile committer, Duke Choice Awards, JCP Award, the whole categories. And on my free time, I write articles and books about Java technologies and so on. So that's me. I love to have contact with everybody, so please contact me. You'll be a huge pleasure. So let's go to more questions. How to embrace the domain-driven design in our team? Excellent question. The first step is make sure that everybody agrees, especially the C level, because methodology involves everybody, right? So the goal is to transfer knowledge between product and the software engineering. If the product don't want to transfer this knowledge, it's impossible to happen. Doesn't matter how much the engineering team wants to go further. If the product team does not want to go, it is impossible. It's a contract in the bi-direction, right? So you need to have the developer team who wants to do that and the product who wants to do that as well. Okay. Let's see. Do you have 2, 3 go-to books on domain design? Heard about the Red Book of Paul Verno, and now your book. Yes, on my book, it is a 230 page. I put those books as reference. There is the Eric Evans book as well. That is this Red Book of domain design. There is a third book that is also amazing. So my goal here is not to redefine what is domain-driven design. It goes more to, okay, what is the mistake? And here we have those reference to go deep on domain-driven design by the concept. Okay, let's go to the next one. I think we are doing some domain-driven design concept in our product, but how to make sure that we are on the right track? First, do you have the strategic domain well defined? Are you going to? It's clear for everybody what they need to do. It's clear to the product what they need to release. Uh, if those questions are right, so it's clear that you have the sub areas, subdomains, the ubiquitous language is well defined. If the strategic part is well defined, let's say that 80% of the middle design is done. Then you need to move just to the code. Okay, so to identify that you're doing right, first pay more attention on the strategic part of the middle design. Is there any more questions? Okay, if not, thank you everybody. It was a huge pleasure to stay here, and hopefully next year I can discuss more
Yes.
topics about Java.
Sure, sure, Otavio. Thank you so much. Before we wrap up this session, uh, like there is a question in my mind, like where can we find like a real like code examples like implementing these strategic and tactical like concepts that we see in the DDD, especially in
That's
Java.
a good question. That's the question. Good question, especially because every business might change, right? Some business might require some more knowledge. Some companies might require microservice. Some company might require event-driven design, or maybe a little bit of all of those that I mentioned. So, where you can find a proper one, that is a good question. What I can show to you, can give to you 1 second, is my workshop where I have some codes where you can take a look, and perhaps that could be a good topic to have to write a book, right? I mean, this soft architecture. Okay, I cannot. Okay, I can put here this soft architecture handbook, because the issue is domain design is agnostic. You can use this even if without Java, but you
Yeah,
can take
sure,
a look on some samples here.
sure, sure. Let me post this in the comment here. Yeah, that's a good one, I think. Yes. Yeah. Think I think Otavio, one of the things that I really experienced in the past projects, that the number one the main issue in our most of the projects is the lack of defining the communication. Like, for example, when I talk about we want to develop a feature, for example, and I name this feature as X. So this feature is maybe misunderstood by the front-end team, by the security team, by all other domains. So the ubiquity language, I think it is the most crucial stuff that we must define. And even if we don't embrace DDD, we have to know that all the engagements, all the teams, they must understand that when we talk about something, we mean something.
Yes, it is crucial. That's why I said to you that how to know if you're doing properly domain-driven design. Spend more time on strategic. I mean, pay more attention.
Yeah,
Okay,
sure.
because language is a part of that.
Sure. Thank you so much, Otavio. I think we don't have
My
any more
pleasure.
questions. Thank you so much, audience. So looking forward to see you, Otavio. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye bye.